So, quick fast. Hey class, John Thomas here. I'm interviewing Mr. Brian Rarey today. He's a practicing Buddhist. So, say hi, Brian.
Class, nice to be with you today.
So, anyway, our assignment was to interview a practitioner of one of the Eastern religions that we're studying. I remembered Eloise saying that you were a practicing Buddhist, and she invited me to the service the other day, which as I was saying earlier, I thought it was going to be a temple of some sort, and I thought there might be a monk there and whatnot, but it was a lay service. And what do you call that service?
Well, what you saw there was really what they refer to as the Sangha. And in Buddhism, there's the three jewels in Buddhism really are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and they all interact. And the Buddha doesn't necessarily have to be the historic Buddha, can be, in Buddhism, we all have a Buddha nature. We all are enlightened. You're enlightened. Everyone in this room is enlightened. But we practice to wake up. So we live kind of in what they might say the world of samsara, the world of dukkha or suffering. And that sort of goes into what the Buddha taught, which really was the alleviation of suffering. And it's not necessarily, he never referred to himself as a god, really just an awakened being. There were Buddhas before him, there were Buddhas after him, and the Buddha really means just awakened one. But he was the first one to teach the alleviation of suffering. And what he taught was the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths really are that there is suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and then the Eightfold Path, which is really the alleviation of suffering. And suffering really in Buddhism is, they refer to it kind of as stress. Some people refer to it as kind of a broken wheel, but it is our grasping and clinging to our delusions. And in Buddhism, the three principles really are impermanence, no self, no permanent self, and nirvana, which is awakening, to the reality as it is. And the Eightfold Path is right understanding, right thought, right livelihood, right speech, right action, right mindfulness, right effort, and right concentration. So you have almost a morality teaching based in what really comes down to practice of mindfulness. So that what you saw really as the Sangha was coming together on that Sunday was sort of a liturgy which is within Shin Buddhism, which was that sort of sect that you met with. And Shin sort of has a historic component in Japan, and it came out at the same time Zen rose in Japan, sort of like 1300s something, sort of medieval Japan. So the Sangha really is kind of the basis, is where everything happens in Buddhism, even though you have a lot of lay components. And oftentimes we practice, and practice is sort of a very key word, a key phrase in all Buddhist activity, because it really is that engagement of mindfulness. But you may see it in the form of meditation, the form of chanting. People come up and they bowed, and they went in and put incense on the top. And that really was, that bow wasn't bowing to anything. It was really bowing, almost to emptiness. It was bowing to the Buddha nature within us, and it was a recommitment to practice, recommitment to be mindful during the week. Because, the flip side of becoming awake is staying asleep. So oftentimes we are just living in, that sort of somnambulistic state. We're trapped in our mind's moving, we're trapped in our identity, we're trapped, in so many ways that just sort of keeps us sort of clinging to, the future, the past, but very rarely puts us in the present.
Mm-hmm.
So
You said that we're all enlightened, but we have to be awakened. So is it accurate, or is it more accurate, or is it less accurate to say that we all have the potential to be enlightened? Is that, or is it really that we all are enlightened?
there's, I think Buddhist thought, particularly sort of Zen thought, which is kind of, or Shin is kind of where I come from, is full of sort of contradictions. But yeah, we are all, I mean, the Buddha would say you are an enlightened being, and practice is enlightenment. When we sit in meditation, that is enlightenment. Although we leave the cushion and we are unenlightened. Or when I'm trying to follow my breath and I lose my concentration and my efforts off balance and my mindfulness leaves, perhaps you could say I am unenlightened or I've gone back to sleep. But often they say the conditions have to be right for enlightenment as well. Oftentimes, the conditions of our mind, our body, conditions of society may limit the opportunity to become enlightened. The simplest thing is, you could go to a retreat. A retreat costs money.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have the money to do it, that still doesn't stop me from enlightenment or practice. But, there might be a Dharma talk that I might miss, or some, dialogue or people that I might not be able to meet. So, and that's a very simple, almost coarse example, but, so I think conditions are important to being on the path.
Mm-hmm. Are those sort of activities, a retreat, whatever the topic, subject matter might be, are those critical? I mean, the Buddha he did it by himself, right? I mean,
that's right.
It's possible for us all to do it by ourselves. We don't need somebody to tell us when we're enlightened, do we?
No, I don't think so. But that's just my personal opinion. Well, you asked several questions. I think working with a teacher and working with a sangha is very critical. I think. Can you do it yourself? There's plenty of people that practice alone, and oftentimes, sure, they find, they wake up on their own. And you're right. But the Buddha did have many teachers along the way. He worked with many ascetics, was taught meditation. At that time in India, there was huge practice all over. But what he found was the ascetic practice was too strict. And he also grew up as a rich nobleman, and prior to leaving, led a life of, just extreme luxury. And what he found, after years of practice, and almost reached the point of death, and came back, sat under the Bodhi tree, and realized what he referred to as the middle way. That it doesn't have to be ascetic practice, that it doesn't have to be, life of luxury, but there is a sort of a balance there. But he also referred to the sangha. He had a fellow that helped him, sort of a cousin that came from the same area in India, that was his attendant for his entire life, for 41 years, I think. And his name was Ananda. And there's one thing he said,